session. We're going to talk about building positive connections with special guest John Fisher. And this webinar is a free monthly learning series presented in partnership by Dakota Medical Foundation, Level Up, Maddo Foundation. Together, we're working to delay, decrease, defeat substance abuse and addiction. So mark your calendars because we'll be doing this series. It's held the first Thursday of every month at noon. And it's going to feature all sorts of local experts. We're going to talk about young people. We're going to talk about how to face working through addiction and protecting our youth and fostering great positive behavior through COVID and well beyond. And so without further ado, let's introduce today's guest, John Fisher. Nearly 20 years of experience in youth mentorship. You've got an extensive background in this. You've experiencing mentor, you've been a mentor, but for those of in our audience that are not familiar, could you just share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I am passionate about this subject because I am someone that directly benefited from it. When I was growing up in Middle Tennessee, I was a kid that went through some pretty intense trauma growing up. And through that grew a lot of bitterness, I would say even hatred for the world, people. And it was some intentional volunteer mentors that really elicited a big change. And it was via my church. And so I look back over my lifetime, and the place that mentoring has had in me has really spurred me on to the person that I am today. A little bit about me. I am the executive director of Friends of the Children Fargo Moorhead. And so we are breaking cycles of generational poverty one child at a time. And we do that by pairing a child that is underserved, at risk, with a paid professional mentor. And we commit to serving that child and their family for 12 plus years, no matter what. We're about a year and a half old, going on 2 years now. And I have had the pleasure of starting the organization. We are a chapter of a larger nonprofit that's been around for 20 plus years. I also am, I think more importantly, I'm the husband to my lovely wife, Abby, and we have 3 wonderful children. The oldest one is 11. And then I moonlight as a pastor. As if I didn't have enough going on, I am the pastor of a church called Sojourn that I had the pleasure of starting back in 2008 and have been pastoring ever since.
Well, John, we're so grateful to have you with us today and to learn from you about things that we can do about mentoring. And really, the whole purpose of this is about creating positive connections and making sure that we're doing our best to help our youth to navigate the seas of life in a positive way. So, just to get started, could you kind of tell us a little bit more of your view as just the power of what a good mentor can do, and a little bit about the types of mentorship that you've seen?
Yeah, so I'm going to lean on my story for just a second with that when you are a child that has gone through, or you're a person that's gone through trauma, specifically a child, when you've gone through trauma, those self-defeating attitudes and those the self-talk that can be so negative becomes the dominant voice in your head and in your heart. And that's not meant to, I don't want to overplay that as a Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder, but when you think of yourself, you think of yourself in a negative way. And so I look back at for me, I found that I got out of that negative talk when I did negative things, which seems so weird, but like that's where I felt like I was accomplishing something. That's when I felt like I was having an identity. And what it took was a well-meaning two. Actually, one was a peer that mentored me, and another was a Sunday school teacher that saw something in me that I didn't see. They saw, actually, it's just kind of funny. I had people telling me I would be a pastor someday when I was in like the deepest, darkest places in my life. And I'd be like, do you know who I am? Like, you don't know me. Like, how would you possibly say that? But they saw something in me that I didn't see. And this really culminated through my parents, the divorce they went through, the trauma that we went through that, and then and before and then after. And this one in particular Sunday school teacher, I remember one day it really came to a head. I was acting out in a way that was fiercely disruptive and unbecoming. And I don't necessarily put this up as a best practice. It worked for me. It doesn't work for everyone. I remember this Sunday school teacher really getting stern with me and saying, John, you're living a lie. you are better than this, and you know better than this, and you need to turn from this. And for that, it was turning to the faith that I had professed at a younger age, but I was not living, and to the faith that this Sunday school teacher was so strong in. And I just remember seeing in that person's face that love that they had for me. Because what do they get out of doing this? They don't get anything. This guy was sacrificing time. He would take me and the other guys and they going to out on his boat. He would sacrifice vacation to go to camp with us, all those things. And he saw something in me that was great, and he wanted to really pull that out. And that friend, I had a friend that was a peer during that. So anyways, all of that was a huge turning point for me. That was a fork in the road, that I was either going to continue to go down the path that I was, and I was in high school at this point, or I was going to choose a different path. And I chose that different path. And I just look at all the blessings and the growth that have happened since then that have made me the person I am today, to the point that really drove me into ministry and to nonprofit work, because I wanted to meet people where they were, and I wanted to be a part of calling out and drawing out those great things that were in them that they maybe hadn't seen, or if they had seen, they had locked them away deep down. So that's a little bit about my story. But then to answer your question specifically, the types of mentoring, um, I think that mentoring really happens in smaller relationships. You can mentor a group. I think you can have a mentoring relationship with a group, but I think that you're going to lose something when it's one person with a larger group. If it's that one-on-one, one-on-two, maybe even one-on-three, I think studies have even shown that is where you start to see some really good things happen, because you're becoming a subject matter expert on that child, on that situation, rather than a generalist. And I think to really dig in deep, you need to become and I say loosely subject matter expert, but that subject is that child. That subject is their situation, and you're learning the intricacies of it. To lean on my professional side of things, when I have in my role as executive director, as you can imagine, I'm a generalist now. You know, I'm the one that raises money. I'm the one that talks about the organization. I'm the one that does these things. Well, I have at times over the last year started to make some calls or suggestions on some program matters that my frontline mentors had to say, John, there's more to this than what you know. And I think we don't need to go that direction. And they were right, because I didn't realize this was playing in. I didn't realize this was playing in. And how did they know? Because they were working one-on-one with that child and in that situation. So I'm obviously a preacher, because I don't know if I fully answered your question, Scott, and I said a lot of words, but those are some general thoughts that I have.
Well, to kind of zero in on your personal story, and thanks for being vulnerable and sharing with us, is, this fork in the road experience. I think for everybody watching, that's part of the human experience, is that we all face those. And you said some really critical things there that, we're all concerned about, which is we've got a negative tape kind of playing in our head. That unfortunately, that's a pretty normal thing for somebody that's an adolescent to have, is negative thoughts about themselves, even if they're not expressing that to you. And then the power of, in your case, there was a Sunday school teacher, and we've heard some others on interviews we've done, and even in some resiliency research, it can be, a coach or a parent's friend, like in your case, a teacher. They just say the right kind of phrase to let you know that you can see things different than what's playing in your head.
And that negative talk, to quick hit that, I have a 6-year-old, and I won't tell you the fullness of the situation to not embarrass him, but we are even seeing at his age some negative self-talk. And so like last night, my precious wife, she just was so intentional with him to pull him aside and give him some hugs and to say, hey buddy, I've heard you say these things over the last couple of days, and those aren't true. You're not good at this. You're not just like that. And I don't know where that's coming from, but you need to know that your mom and dad, we believe in you, and we're a faith-filled family. That God believes in you, and that, and she was really hammering that home with him. And I thought that was really, really powerful. So that fork in the road, just to go back to what you just said, I agree. I think we do all come to those, Scott. And sometimes they're more dramatic than others. Doesn't make it better. doesn't make it worse. I tell people often that I hope that my children avoid some of the drama that I had, because as their parent, I don't want them going through those things. But at the end of the day, I hope that my children know that their parents are in their corner, and that we are really feeding them, and we are really helping them as people as well as parents. And so that's that self-talk side. But will you remind me the other side of what you just asked?
Well, actually, to continue to go on that, John, is, if we're waiting for a fork in the road experience, I mean, part of why we're breaking bread together over lunch and having these discussions is we're trying to get ahead of those.
Yeah.
And, a lot of, we don't come with a warning light that just tells everybody, and like, now's the big decision, my life's going to go one way or another. So there's consistency, which is, your program is quite a long commitment. But could you talk a little bit about, so you've shared with, as a parent, you're watching for self-talk, but what are some of the things, both in your personal experience of what you do, but also with the mentors you work with, how do they do that consistently, and what are they looking for, and how are they serving as a support consistently?
Yeah. So first thing I'm going to say is that people aren't plug and play, and one size doesn't fit all. And sadly, I feel like systems out there can be set up to make it, well, if you plug this method into here, rock and roll. These are the outcomes that you're going to see. But they know, you and I know, people aren't that way necessarily. We all have things that make us unique and special, but then also can be challenge points. How I put it is that oftentimes our greatest strengths are our biggest weaknesses or challenge points. And so with that, I think that you need to that in mentoring, you need to really become an expert on that person and their situation. So I think I saw Brody Clark on here, and Brody was a mentor that worked for me when I was at Charism. And one of the things about Brody that I just want to brag on real quick is that Brody became an expert on the kids that he worked with at the middle school. I really appreciated that about him. So much so that when he left me, no bitterness, it's okay. What you're doing at Young Life is good, is great actually. But so much so that the school really missed that, because they had seen people come in and just try to implement and plug their program in. Oh, if we do this, this is the whiz bang, you're going to get it. Well, no, what they saw with Brody was that the power of relationship, and a big word that you guys all use, I used to, the power of intentionality. Being intentional, looking for those moments, looking for those nuggets in that child's life of going, I see something here. Or, man, what I don't see here, we need to work on that with them. But it's different from this child to this child. It's different from this child to this child. One of the things that I really love at Friends of the Children is that we spend 4 hours a week with each of our kiddos and their family. Now, but it starts with the kid. You can see on my little name tag, I don't know if you can see it, it's 1-over-1. It's a one-on-one relationship. And so we spend 4 hours a week with each kid. And so each mentor, it's a full-time paid professional mentor, they have 8 children on their roster. That's it. Now you think about that and you might be like, oh my gosh, like that's incredible. It is, because those 4 hours, that mentor is studying that child. That mentor is studying that situation. They are getting to know who are the people that are involved in this. To lean on Brody again, one of the things that Brody and I did, I think it was in that first year, is we were looking at some situations that he was working with. This was while he and I worked at Charism. And we took the child and we created this system where we go, who's on the child's team? Who's on their team? Because sometimes on their team, you have some not good teammates, some challenging teammates. And so we might need to do a little bit of work with that teammate or do a little bit of work with that child. But then you might have some good teammates that you're like, hey, you know what? Let's really amplify that relationship. And one of the things that we started to see with that is all the influences, because on that child's team are his peers. On that child's team are the caregivers at home. On that child's team are their interests. And with that, it ballooned, it grew. And Scott, and I know, is that when you are being intentional and you are really focusing on that child, your focus quickly grows beyond that child, really quickly grows beyond that person, because we are a sum of parts of what is around us, those that influence us. So sometimes in your work as a mentor, you find opportunity, and I really mean it, opportunity to influence others while you're still keeping the focus on that one that you're really working with. You have an opportunity to then work with Okay, so I'm talking to people that work with children. You really now have the opportunity to do something with their caregivers, with their parents. That's the term we use for parents. With their caregivers, you have the opportunity to do some work with their friends. Now, still keeping the focus, because you don't want that child to go, oh, they're just leaving me. No, but what you're showing them is how much that you love them and you care for them, to also start to do some work with some others.
Well, it's a great word. Is intentionality is something to key in on. And I think for all of us that are viewing this now and will be the recording is, as adults to accept the responsibility to look at the team around our child
Mm,
or those that we care about.
mm.
I think that you make a really good point because, life happens and decisions are made. We go to a new school or things shift and, we can just be at adrift.
Yeah.
And, this is really a call of what can happen if we get decisive and we get involved. And it's really beautiful language, to put a team around it. That makes me think of like Mayo Medical Center, like they have a team of doctors that help you,
Yes,
not just one. And that's maybe, mentoring to kind of look at it as an intentional circle
it is.
that we're there to surround them
Yeah.
with the right kinds of influences because it really stacks up.
It really is. Like I look back at my life and the people that were on my team. I mean, a young child. I was 7, 8 years old when all this was going down in those early days. And on my team were my parents and my siblings, and then some friends. And so one of the things that some of the mentoring that happened in my life is that they saw that some of the negative self-talk, where it was coming from. And so what these folks wanted to do was to start to combat that by not trying to take it out, because you're not going to remove necessarily in the role of a mentor someone from someone's life, but they wanted to fill it with something else. So if this negative self-talk is coming from self, but it's also coming from somewhere else, well, let's start to fill that bucket with some positive talk. I remember the notes that they would write to me, and also the phone calls, hearing, this is the time when text wasn't a thing, and then popping by to really start to fill up my bucket with some of the positive talk with that, because they're like, I can't change that team, can't do anything about that in my role, but what I can do is start to be a stellar teammate, and then also start to guide me towards teammates that were really bucket fillers and not bucket emptiers, not pulling things out. So yeah, and to pivot back again, it's that intentionality. There are beautiful systems out there, and maybe some of the folks that are watching are a part of systems that are just wonderful and they have great outcomes. I lead an organization that we have a formula, we have a system that we follow, but you can't just rely on that. You have to be intentional and really focus in on that child, and know that as human beings, we are sorted, complicated creatures, and that's okay. But we need to be just as complicated in our work with them, and not just say, oh, A plus B equals C every time. Well, no, A plus B might equal F, and that's okay. We need to be able to pivot and to be nimble with those relationships.
Well, it makes me think of the Harvard studies, this longitudinal study on health and wellness, and it's one of the longest that's ever ran. And one of the major conclusions was that if you don't have positive relationships in your life, if you have a lack of connection, it is bad for your health. In fact, it's so adverse to your health, it's more dangerous than smoking. And so this power of a relationship, and I think, you're bringing us wisdom and insights and to making time for that and to be intentional about it. So you have a formula at Friends of the Children, but, what are some of the go-to sort of just basics of, making sure you create time to connect with those that you want to serve as a mentor for?
Yeah. So two things. So I'm going to use the word intentionality, but I'm first going to pivot back quick, and I might be getting ahead of myself. So, not knowing everybody that's on the call, one of the things as a middle-aged guy is access. I don't have ready access to teens and younger. I just don't. And that's understandably so. I probably shouldn't, just in my everyday life. But if you want to make meaningful relationships with a youth, you need access to them. Well, how do you do that in an appropriate way? That would be through your faith community. That's a great way to do it. Intentionally serving in those areas in your faith community. That could be through a service club. I am a loyal Kiwanian. I love my Kiwanis Club. I've been a part of it for, 6 years now, 5 years now, and I love it. There are opportunities to serve in the schools. non-COVID times in a typical realm, but I could expound on that a little bit more. But then also you could volunteer in places, Friends of the Children. I again to talk about Brody on here, Young Life. There are some other great organizations out there that can facilitate those relationships. And then to your specifics, so you have to be intentional about finding these people. If you think that a child is just going to show up that needs mentoring, I'm sure it does happen. Typically not. Typically, you need to go look for that. I can tell you, as a pastor and a nonprofit exec, putting on both hats there, and as a father, when someone I know and trust wants to come make a positive impact in the people that are important to me, that means so much. My 11-year-old, there's a lady at church just this past Monday. While my kiddo was out of school, she came by and picked her up at 1 o'clock, took her back to her house. She babysat her two little kids while the mom was doing some laundry. But what the mom is doing, she's just dripping all of these little mentoring conversations in my daughter's heart. I mean, I might even get emotional telling you that. Like, that means so much to me. Like when she says, "Can I hang out with your kid?" My wife and I are like, "Yes, yes, do it. Where do we need to bring her? What do we need to give you?" I mean, I was giving her gift cards she would pay for something while they were out. And so, but what did that take? It took intentionality from this lady saying, I want to make a positive impact in a youth's life. And so she came to me, a friend. I've known this lady for a long time. Can I spend time with her? So there's that intentionality of finding access, but then intentionality in the relationship. I've as a pastor, I have had well-meaning, well-intended Sunday school teachers that will open up the curricula and they will read that to the children that they're working with, and they will pray and close it back at the end of the session. Which, is it well-meaning? Is it well-intentioned? It is. Is it effective for some? It is. Is it effective for all? It's not. And so those Sunday school teachers and youth mentors that went above and beyond, that said, "Hey, John, I want to do a movie night for the kids. How could I facilitate this and it be appropriate and have the best practices involved?" Awesome. I loved brainstorming that with them. And then, or they would come, "Hey, John, I've really sparked this relationship with these two. How could I then go deeper?" I'm like, "Well, let's start a conversation with their parents. Let's get this involved and let's start to facilitate that." But you heard what I just said. There was that intentionality of, I want to do this. Now, we live in a world where we have to be careful. We have to put some hedges and some mitigations in place to make sure that we're protecting these vulnerable kiddos. But with that, it is totally possible. Now, during a COVID time, that's a challenge. I mean, that's hard. It is hard because this thing that we are all dealing with globally drives us apart when at a time that we need to be together. And so you would be surprised, and maybe you're not, that technology means with a child can be helpful. Now, with a 6-year-old having a phone call, well, I don't know about you, Scott, but my kids talking to their grandparents and even telling them thank you for Christmas was challenging. But to a lot of kids, recorded message that you could send back and forth, depending on, we utilize this app called Marco Polo. And my children do it with some of their friends that aren't here. And what it is, it's on my wife's phone, and then it's on, we don't do technology with our kids at this point. They don't have ready access to it. So she has to get my wife's phone, and it's on my wife's Marco Polo account, and she is poloing some of her friends and family in other places. Well, we have access to it, and they're having some, it's surprising sometimes how deep a conversation can go with an 11-year-old. And they're having these really neat conversations that are going on. But you can do it via Zoom. You can do it via text message. So intentionality, if you want to do it, there's a way to do it. And you have to have the internal fortitude to press through to find those opportunities or those ways to do it.
Well, and I think you're really helping us to see how mentoring is a gateway for more positive relationships. That if we're a parent, or if we're a coach, or if we're involved in a faith community, or if we're involved in a social group, or part of the Kiwanis, whatever it may be, is that these are real opportunities for us to intentionally get involved and to be positive in people's lives. What words do you have, John, for those that are watching, that may not consider themselves a mentor? They think they're just a normal person kind of going throughout their life. I mean, who should be a mentor? What does a mentor look like? And what words do you have for us on that?
I'd say if you are somebody that, if you have a story to tell of your life situation, I think you're someone that can mentor somebody else. Now, we're not all wired the same. We know that. And it takes a lot of different parts. in order to achieve goals. And so being maybe that frontline person working with a child, maybe that's not their cup of tea, and that's okay. That's okay. But if you have the desire to make that positive impact in a youth's life, um, you you can and you should. Um, and maybe it's the preacher in me being super heavy-handed. I can do that, or the fundraiser in me saying, "Here's the call to action right now." But if you're on this call, it shows that you have something. Maybe these folks are already doing a lot of mentoring, and they're just wanting a little pep rally. And let me clap for you. You're kicking tail. Way to go. That is incredible that you're taking a Thursday lunch to listen to me and Scott here. That is incredible. Good for you. Or maybe you want to come here. Hey, I do need to be more intentional. I have been intentional, but I think I could go farther with this, because I'm going to be the first one to confess that COVID has tempted me, and I have even succumbed to it, to distance myself socially, when really physical is how I need to distance, not social. I love that we've started to change that verbiage, because I think that is so powerful. Physically, we can be apart, but that doesn't mean we need to be apart socially. So if you have a story to tell, if you have had a positive impact in your life, if somebody has made a meaningful a contribution to you, well, you can pass that on. And then the preacher side of me, you should pass that on. That is a great opportunity to do so. And I would love for you to reach out to me to talk about that. I know there's other people on the call that I think would be awesome, and very up for you having that conversation. I'm going to brag on Scott. This was about a year ago. I was just in a funk. I was having a hard time, and I think Scott reached out to me just to check in, and we drank some tea, and he puts milk in his tea, or almond milk in his tea. I think that's because he said his wife is from Canada. Is that right? Yeah. So I never had that. And he spent the whole time just filling my cup and building me up. Well, he didn't know he was mentoring somebody at that moment, because that's what I needed. And he was calling out greatness in me that he saw that I didn't necessarily see, or I was having negative self-talk. So I know this is specifically talking about impacting a youth in a positive way for the rest of their life, but maybe it's the child in me, or the child in all of us. Sometimes you need that as an adult as well.
Well, and I think that's a basic element of human relationships that maybe we're currently overlooking, which is, you go through these seasons. And I think that might be part of maturity, is that, we got to get to the side of supporting one another so that we can also help those that are younger.
It's so true. And you're definitely older than me, Scott. I don't know if you are. I'm just being silly. But we do this generation of these generations of children that I'm middle age, late 30s here. So but these generations of children that are coming up, they have stressors that, I thought I had a lot of stressors, and I look at some of theirs, I'm going, man, I'm so thankful I didn't have that. They need these bucket fillers, these mentors in their lives. And some of them have it, and some of them don't. Like the work we do at Friends, one of the intakes that we do is that when we are evaluating a situation with a child, we are looking for them to have very few bucket fillers, and that's using a John word at this moment. Even much so that we're like, well, this child has an auntie that's involved really heavily, so actually they're going to move lower on the list of priority, because we have other children that literally have no one. They barely even have their caregivers, their parents. And so we look at that, and I just tell you that situation, that is not a one person situation. Those children are all over. And I've been working in the field for a while now, and I thought I had seen some of the most challenging situations. And then when I came over to Friends, I found that I had not. And maybe I still haven't. Maybe some of you have. But there is so much need out there, and we all have stories to tell, and we all have gifts to give. And I greatly challenge you to look for those opportunities, be intentional about the access, and then when you get that opportunity, be intentional about having those conversations and making that impact.
Well, John, can you tell us a little bit about, signs to look for and interventions? So if we're working with somebody and we're trying to be support, and we might start to see some things, how do we handle a situation like that? What are we looking for, and how do we handle a situation like that?
Yeah. So to lean back to something I've said before is the that talk that they're telling themselves. Let me just be really vulnerable. So my son saying that the other night, last night, I have since then been thinking, I know I've probably added to that. And what have I done? What am I doing? Now, it's not to say that we are, our children or these children are just, copies of what's their parents necessarily, but we contribute to that. And so I just kind of stepped back and I'm like, I bet, no, I've said this before, and that's not going to help him. That's only going to hurt him, and I don't need to do that. So how do they think of themselves? So one of the things that I do in starting a relationship with people in a mentoring is I ask them to tell their story. Tell me about yourself. And I'm really listening for what is being said and what is not being said. So for instance, if they have very few positive things to say about themselves or their story, that's a key to me. That we have some challenges. We have some, may even say, trauma in their life that I'm going to need to start to do some work on. On the other side of it too, I'm looking for what are the things that they're saying, and they might just be flat out saying, "Well, I'm not good at this. I'm really this. And it's just stuff that you would step back and say, man, if that's how they're articulating to me, what are they really thinking in their head? Because if you're anything like me, what I say is usually not as intense as what I'm thinking and what's necessarily in my heart. So you're looking for those things. And then what do you do with it? Now, we want to be surgeons. We don't want to be blacksmiths. So a blacksmith, when you're making a sword, you're making a blade, you're taking a raw piece of metal and you are melting that and forging that and just banging the fire out of it and shaping it and banging and banging. Well, what's a surgeon doing? Well, if a surgeon's banging on something, we've got a problem there. Well, they are being very meticulous and very specific on what they're doing and just really getting it down to the most minute details. Because if you look at the tools, a tool for a blacksmith is a hammer. A tool for a surgeon is often those cameras that are microscopic. And so you look at those two, one of them is supposed to get down deep down there, and one of them is meant to bang out. Now, if you're anything like me, sometimes I need a little bit of banging, but that's not what I always need. I need someone to get down deep with it. So when you hear those talk, you're drawing those things out. You're finding out more about the situation. You're wanting to be a detective, but to not be threatening. You want to ask them questions that draw, not questions that close. Like a question that closes is a yes or no, because the yes or no, you're done. But a question that draws would be a narrative. It's putting them on a monologue and them telling. And so the another idea too, that when you find things that are outside of your wheelhouse, because this isn't some sort of a savior thing here, we're not going in and saving the world here. We're going in and we're helping. We're being a part of mentoring and guiding with this. And so one of the things, you got to bring other people onto the team, because there might be others that can really make an impact. I was mentoring some teens at my church, and I found that there were some situations that I was not as equipped as others were. And so I brought some others in on it and I don't want to say it was a warm handoff because I still was involved, but it was a warm, like, hey, come be a part of this. And at first it was a little threatening to the teams that I was working with, because they were like, wait, what? Are you abandoning me? You're just another one on the list. And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I'm adding to this, because here's why. And I look back, I didn't do a great job explaining it up front and really guiding them. I was like, hey, we need to do this. Let's do this. They said yes. Then I brought them in. It's like, well, you know what? Probably should have given it some more time talking about that idea, or planting the seed of the idea of let's look at, who else in your life would really make a positive impact? And then once we've disseminated that down, start to go, well, what would it be like to bring somebody on? And then bringing somebody on as well. So bringing other people onto the team to be a part of that is tremendously helpful.
Well, then that goes to this intentionality of sort of building a team, and, also knowing that you don't have to brave this alone if there's concerns about widening who you're mentoring. Could you talk a little bit more too about, this language of really getting to know them is, this is a great phrase, is become an expert in them. That's somebody who's studying them, that's leaning into them. And so you just share a little bit more about, what are some good approaches to really pour into somebody's life?
is using a common language, making sure you're talking to them in a way that is understandable and is impactful. Now, to do that, it takes time. So one of the methodologies that we employ is before we start really tracking outcomes with a child at Friends of the Children, we spend substantial amount of time, I mean months, just getting to know them and building a bond. That's the term that we use, building a bond. And so in building that bond with them, we are starting to see, okay, what's the story? What's the language? What's really makes them tick? I have to say, you asked the question earlier, like what are some things to do? We at Friends of the Children, we do mentoring in schools, we do them in homes, but during a pandemic and the family is okay and everybody's healthy and it's really cold outside and you don't have places to take the kids, we've been known to lay the seats down in the vehicle and do puzzles in the back of the cars. I have some beautiful pictures of my mentors doing that. So, but you're finding what makes that child tick. And then you start to draw that out. I have one mentor, Chai. He despises fishing, despises it. But he has one of his kids that has always been a dream of his. And so Chai regularly takes this little buddy out fishing. And we laugh about it every time we're recapping because Chai's like, took him fishing again, bought him some poles. But what did he do? He found out his interest and he said, it might be my interest, but my interest in this moment isn't the most important thing. His interest is the most important thing. And how much it meant to this little buddy to have his mentor, Chai, take him fishing on a regular basis. Even so much so it came out later, he told him that he didn't like it as much. But you look at that, how beautiful that picture is.
Well, as we move to wrap up, a quick reminder, you can put any questions that you have in the chat. John, you've led us through a remarkable amount of territory in a short amount of time. That a mentor can really be all of us, and that we're serving in mentor roles as parents and with our professional jobs, that mentoring is not just for youth. We mentor each other, we mentor others around. That most of us, it's not something to be shameful of, have a negative tape playing. Mm-hmm. And we want to address that, and we want to make sure we're addressing that in the youngsters around mm-hmm. us. And then also that we want to continue to make sure we're evaluating who's around them mm-hmm. and making sure there's a good team. And that as we continue to intentionally build around people, that we add people when we need them to, mm-hmm. and then that we're really taking time to build a deep bond, using language that they understand and leaning into them and their interests, mm-hmm. and being open and being curious to the point that you become an expert mm-hmm. in that person, which is really beautiful language. Mm-hmm. So as we move towards the close, parting thoughts that you have for all of the people viewing this live and they'll be watching the recording when it comes to being a mentor.
Well, first off, I'm impressed that he was able to do that, because if you had asked me to disseminate what I just said, I wouldn't have been able to. So thank you, Scott. I'd say to end, I'm a call to action kind of guy. And I like leaving something going, what do I do? 2 words. 1 word, 2 parts to it. Intentionality in seeking these opportunities out, and then intentionality in taking these opportunities is what I would say. That these children are worth it. Their stories are worth it. And I think that with the group that we have on here, there's some pretty incredible things that they could do in intentionally looking for these opportunities and intentionally taking the opportunities that present themselves to mentor youth for positive change.
Well, it's, your experience has really helped us, and we've all gained a great deal. How can people find out more about you, John, and your efforts?
Yeah, so you can go to friendsfargomoorhead.org is our website. Also, we're going to be a part of Giving Hearts Day. And I just did this cool meeting just now, man. I just sat down with a coffee roaster in town, Red Pine Coffee Company, and they are giving us 25% of their sales of their lamplighter blend for Giving Hearts Day. I just left that meeting and came here. So I'm kind of on cloud 9 about that. I think that is really fun because I'm a big coffee drinker, if you can't tell right here. But go to friends fargomoorhead.org. Then, or you could reach out to me, Jay Fisher at friendsfargomoorhead.org. And I would love to talk. We have some great partnerships in our community. We are a organization that is on the grow and on the go. And we are really looking to expand across our region and to expand across the greater Minnesota and North Dakota as well, because we keep finding that the needs are there. And that these kids are worth it.
Well, John, thank you so much for sharing that. And it is Giving Hearts Day season for all of you watching. this year. We've added volunteers and goods. We've widened the portal of generosity and are inviting you to find an organization like Friends of the Children, like Maddo Foundation, like Level Up, givingheartsday.org. You can schedule a gift. Next webinar you'll want to mark your calendars is why teens use, and we're going to be talking about parenting and principles for understanding with Travis Lynn. It's going to be a great discussion, and make sure you check out the Maddo and Level Up Facebook pages for additional information. Until then, we appreciate you and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.